There's no greater pain than realizing that, on the day you most expected affection, you found only silence. On my birthday, there were no phone calls, no messages, no flowers, nothing, just the emptiness that screams louder than any words. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Sometimes it's not strangers who hurt us, but those we dedicate our entire lives to. While many believe that family is sacred, my experience has shown otherwise. Within family relationships, the greatest betrayals can arise. I experienced this bitterly until the moment a simple envelope appeared on my doorstep. It wasn't a gift, it wasn't affection. It was something far more disturbing, and it was precisely that envelope that transformed humiliation into courage and silence into silent revenge. What was inside it not only changed the course of that birthday, it changed the course of my entire story. On the day I turned 67, I woke up earlier than usual, expecting the phone to ring at any moment. I expected to hear Amanda's voice or Thomas's message, but the silence was absolute. It's curious how the absence of a simple gesture can weigh more than tons. There, I realized that sometimes the greatest betrayal lies not in the words spoken, but in those that never arrive. I looked at the cake I'd made myself, still untouched on the table. I thought about how many times I've taught my children that politeness begins with small gestures, saying, "Thank you," offering a hand, remembering a date. It's amazing how these details, when neglected, become scars. Humiliation doesn't need an audience to hurt. All it takes is the empty heart of someone who expected respect. And look, this isn't unique to my story. Who hasn't experienced the silence of someone who should be there? It's like that friend who disappears on moving day, or the colleague who avoids looking when you need help. Family relationships should be foundations, but when they fail, they leave deep cracks. Silence in this context screams louder than any argument. As the clock ticked away, I wondered, was it too much to ask to wait for a phone call? Life, which had taught me so much about dignity, now seemed intent on teaching me a harsh lesson. The respect I'd always offered my children fell on deaf ears. And, ironically, I smiled slightly, knowing that life has curious ways of turning things around. I picked up an old book that I always recommend, Who Loves, Educates, by Ichami Tiba. In it, I learned that love without limits and education without firmness do not build healthy adults. Perhaps I had been too generous. Perhaps I had neglected discipline at certain moments. This reflection lingered as the cake cooled, waiting for candles that would never be lit. That's when I heard the doorbell, a simple sound, but it cut through the silence like a sword. For a moment, my heart raced. Was it Amanda or Thomas? I even thought maybe a neighbor would come to wish me well. Sometimes it's in the most naive hope that emotion grows stronger, even after disappointment. Upon opening the door, I saw no familiar faces. Only an envelope rested on the threshold, cold, impersonal, almost ironic. There, I realized that life had prepared a different kind of gift. Not what I wanted, but what perhaps I needed. And the question that echoed was inevitable. What was in that letter left on my doorstep? As I looked down at the thick envelope, my heart pounded strangely. There was no sender, just my name written mechanically, coldly, and without affection. For a moment, I wanted to believe it was a belated gift, perhaps a hidden gesture from Amanda or Thomas, perhaps trying to disguise the mistake of forgetfulness. The mind, when needy, is adept at making excuses for others. I held the envelope carefully, as if it were a fragile piece of crystal. It's funny how a simple piece of paper can carry so much emotion. I remembered when they were children, I would hide little letters in my children's notebooks, only for them to discover a loving message in the middle of class. Life has these ironies. Before I would leave loving messages, now I found before me a silence wrapped in brown paper. I hesitated. You know that feeling that something will change the moment you open a door, answer a phone call, or, as in my case, rip open an envelope flap. That's exactly what I felt. A sinking feeling in my stomach, a mixture of fear and anticipation. It wasn't just curiosity, it was instinct warning me that nothing would be the same after that moment. I placed the envelope on the table, next to the cake, still waiting for candles. The contrast caught my attention. On one side, the sweetness of family tradition. On the other, the the weight of something official, almost bureaucratic. This is how life often presents itself, between what we desire and what actually happens, and suddenly, what seemed like just another ordinary day becomes a turning point. I decided not to open it right away. I made coffee, walked around the room, and tried to distract my mind. It's amazing how, faced with uncertainty, we seek postponements, as if procrastination could change the content of what's already been written. How many times have you put off a difficult conversation until tomorrow, believing the problem would resolve itself? Well, it doesn't disappear. It just grows. Finally, I held the envelope again. I ran my fingers over the glued flap, feeling the texture of the paper. A memory surfaced. My father used to tell me that every choice is like tearing a seal. Once made, there's no going back. I took a deep breath, knowing that from then on, there would be no going back. I had to face whatever it was. And then, with a firm gesture, I ripped open the envelope. The crisp sound of the paper ripping open seemed to echo throughout the house. I found no gift, not even a card with kind words. What I saw were official documents, stamps, signatures, terms that carried no emotion, just decisions. But the question that gnawed at me was even greater. Whose coldness had come from? As soon as my eyes scanned the first few lines, I felt a shiver run down my spine. It wasn't just letterhead. It was as if every word had been written to wrest peace from me. These were legal documents, written in an impersonal, cold, almost cruel tone. Nothing there evoked affection, only bureaucracy. The emotion that overcame me was a mixture of betrayal and humiliation, because there was not even an attempt to soften the harshness of those lines. With each paragraph I read, I realized someone had made a serious decision about the house where I'd experienced my greatest family memories. That house wasn't just brick and mortar, but a stage for laughter, arguments, birthdays, and kitchen advice. Losing that space would be like ripping away a piece of my own dignity. It was as if someone had suddenly decided my history could be erased with a simple signature. I closed my eyes for a moment. I took a deep breath and tried to gather my thoughts. How many times have I seen people give up fighting for their rights simply because they believed they had no voice? I myself have advised neighbors and friends to never accept humiliation in silence, to stand up with respect and firmness in the face of injustice. But now, faced with those papers, I realized that theory is always easier than practice. That's when I picked up the documents again and pored over the details. There were names, dates, technical terms. I felt like each word weighed a ton. The butterflies in my stomach grew, but at the same time, a survival instinct began to awaken within me. I knew I needed to find out who was behind it, who had taken this step that directly affected my life and my family relationships. My gaze then fell on the bottom of the document, and there, like a signature burned into the paper, was the name of the person responsible. It was at that precise moment that the ground seemed to disappear beneath my feet. The impact was so strong that I had to place my hand on the table to keep from falling. Because he wasn't a stranger, he wasn't a bank, he wasn't a jealous neighbor, he was someone who carried my blood, someone who grew up within my embrace and care. It was the most painful proof that often the greatest betrayal comes not from outside, but from within the family itself. And with this discovery, I understood that my silence would be my most powerful weapon. The moment of confrontation hadn't yet arrived, but it would come. And when it did, it wouldn't be just another conversation. It would be the revelation that would change the course of everyone around me. When I clearly read Amanda's name on the documents, I felt as if an invisible blade had pierced my heart. My own daughter, the girl I held in my arms and taught to take her first steps, was the one trying to tear me away from the home I'd built with so much effort. It wasn't just a legal matter. It was a personal, intimate betrayal that wounded not only my heart, but also the dignity I'd always tried to preserve within my family. The humiliation was silent, but devastating. Imagine discovering that someone you offered education, values, and love has become the very person trying to erase your history. It's like planting a tree, caring for it for years, and one day realizing that the very fruit is trying to tear out your roots. The pain is almost impossible to put into words, but I felt it in every beat of my heart. At that moment, I thought about how many times Amanda had sat at that same table asking for advice on work, relationships, and even raising her children. I always listened respectfully, believing that, in the end, what I taught would plant seeds of gratitude. However, the papers before me revealed something different. Perhaps ambition had spoken louder than blood ties. I didn't rebel loudly. I preferred strategic silence, because I've learned that planned revenge is worth more than a thoughtless reaction. Sometimes, remaining silent isn't a sign of weakness, but of strength. Those who act with uncontrolled emotions can lose themselves. Those who act calmly find the right moment to transform pain into liberation. As I folded the papers and put them in a folder, I felt a new energy surge within me. It was as if that humiliation had awakened something dormant, the certainty that I needed to turn the tables. After all, respect isn't begged for, it's earned. And dignity, when attacked, demands a fitting response. I decided then and there not to make rash accusations. Amanda didn't deserve to see my despair, but rather my serenity. Thomas, for his part, remained silent. Whether out of complicity or ignorance, I couldn't tell. This mystery only reinforced my decision to wait for the right moment to reveal the whole truth. And the perfect opportunity would soon arise, because days later, there would be a family dinner, and I knew it was in front of everyone, in the toast celebrating our union, that I would reveal what I kept hidden. The silence would end in a gesture no one would ever forget. The family dinner seemed, at first glance, an ordinary scene. Amanda and Thomas arrived smiling, exchanging hugs as if nothing had happened. I, however, observed every gesture with a different perspective. The betrayal didn't erase the thrill of motherhood, but it made it clear that there was an open wound in those family relationships. The contrast between the image of harmony and the weight of humiliation was almost theatrical, as if everyone were playing rehearsed roles. As the dishes were served and small talk filled the room, I remained calm. I held within me the certainty that this would be the moment to transform silence into liberation. There was no point in raising my voice or accusing. True respect is earned when the truth emerges on its own, without shouting. I knew that, at the right moment, everyone would see who had truly acted with dignity and who had given in to greed. As the wine glass was raised for the toast, I took a deep breath. My eyes scanned the faces gathered there, some attentive, others distracted. Then, with a firm gesture, I removed the envelope from my bag and placed it on the table. The dry sound of the paper hitting the tabletop was enough to silence the voices. I didn't need to ask for silence. It came on its own, heavy, laden with expectation. I held the glass in one hand and the envelope in the other. Before we toast the family, I think it's only fair to reveal something that concerns us all, I said, keeping my tone calm. Amanda swallowed. Thomas looked away. It was as if the mask was beginning to crack in front of everyone. The emotion I felt wasn't one of immediate revenge, but of quiet strength. Every glance around the table sought to understand what was about to happen. Respect, previously absent, now seemed to hinge on those next words. It was as if I suddenly held in my hands not just papers, but the key to the entire truth that had been hidden. Dignity, which seemed lost, was about to be regained in front of everyone. There was no rush. I paused for a long time, allowing the tension to spread like wildfire. Revenge, when well executed, doesn't have to be cruel. It can simply be the stark revelation of the truth. And in that moment, every second of silence was a reminder that betrayal, no matter how hidden, will always find its way to light. Then I lifted the envelope a little higher, bringing it into view. The air hung suspended, as if no one dared breathe. I knew what I was about to reveal would change the fate of that table forever. And now I ask you, how many times have you silently swallowed humiliation within your own family? How many times was the respect you so generously given exchanged for contempt, and you pretended it didn't hurt? Life has shown me that dignity isn't something others grant. It's something we choose not to give up. Betrayal can hurt, but it can also be the trigger for your liberation. Will you continue to accept the role of victim, or will you transform your pain into strength? Will you allow your story to be erased, or will you write the next chapter with courage? These are choices that define not only today, but the legacy you leave behind. If this story touched you, it's because there may be a wound deep inside you begging for healing. And healing begins when we look at our own lives and decide, enough is enough. I deserve respect. Think about it. And of course, if you want to continue learning, reflecting, and finding the strength to turn things around, subscribe to the channel now and turn on notifications. Here, each story brings a lesson that can change your life, but only if you decide to apply it.